So this video is about the beginning of Chapter 6. Chapter 6 in your book is called Demand, Supply, and Pricing, but I like to call it the pricing system. So this chapter we're going to actually talk about putting supply and demand together. So if you were in class, you participated in the ruler and colored pencils activity, where we went and sold rulers and colored pencils, and we graphed it. And so you use your colored pencils and your rulers to draw your graph. And what we found was we found a point where there was a point where supply and demand intersect, which makes sense because we already know demand goes downward sloping, supply goes upward sloping, so it makes sense that they're going to intersect some point. So the beginning of this notes is about the pricing system. So the first thing is, what the heck is equilibrium? Now, my guess is that you actually probably have talked about equilibrium before in science class. Equilibrium in general is talking about a balance. So in the case of supply and demand, we're talking about where there's a balance between supply and demand. So where the quantity supplied equals the quantity demand. And so we say that the price is stable. And the reason the price is stable is because the supply equals demand. This tells us where the price should be, and what we say is that the market clears. What we mean by that is that there's nobody left willing to buy more, there's nobody left willing to supply more. This is what the price should be. This is where we have that nice balance. So aside from your ruler and colored pencil graph, I also am going to reference this graph. I pulled this one off from the internet, and so somebody somewhere has this graph of ice cream cones. So imagine, if you will, somebody who is selling ice cream cones out of an ice cream truck. According to this graph, what should the price of the ice cream cones be? $2, right? Because that's where supply and demand meet, or they intersect. So at $2, that's what the price should be. And how many ice cream cones will we be selling at $2? Well, 7. Equilibrium has two parts to it, price and quantity. So whenever we talk about equilibrium, we're always going to talk about and reference the price and the quantity. Now, not in a perfect world, we would be at equilibrium all the time, but because we don't have any government body that actually forces us at this point, we're not always there. So sometimes we aren't there because we are going to be either above or below equilibrium. So first off, we could potentially have a surplus. So a surplus is when the quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demand. So that means that we have way more people that are willing to sell this item than the amount of people that are actually willing to buy the item. So now, what does that mean for our graph? Well, if we go back to that ice cream cone graph, where do you suppose surpluses are going to be? So where are we going to have supply is greater than the demand? We have way more people offering this product for sale than what people are willing to buy. So do you suppose surpluses are going to be above equilibrium or below equilibrium? Well, hopefully you said above. Anything above equilibrium is going to be a surplus. Now in class, when we talked about this, I had everybody go back to their ruler graph and shade in that region above equilibrium. And it kind of looks like an upside down triangle. And sometimes it's kind of weird shaped just because of our graph, but that's okay. Anything above equilibrium is a surplus. Okay, that's great. Now, what can we tell from using our graph? So, let's say this ice cream cone salesperson is going to try setting the price of the ice cream cones at $4. So maybe they're getting greedy. Maybe they think that, yeah, man, I can go and make a buttload of money if I go and sell them at $4 a piece. Well, what's the problem with that? Well, at $4, look at this is $4, and you can see where it hits my supply and demand curve. So look at $4, okay, it first hits my demand line, because this is my demand line going downward sloping. It's not different colors, but you get the picture. And so if you follow it down, you have one quantity, one ice cream cone that is demanded at $4. Only one person will buy it. But at $4, how many ice cream cones is my ice cream cone salesperson willing to offer? 13. They're willing to offer 13, but I only can get one person to buy it. So how much of a surplus am I going to have? How many ice cream cones am I going to have sitting around melting? 12, right? Because 13 minus 1 is 12. Okay, so this person, okay, our ice cream sales person decides, okay, that's way too expensive. I'm not selling enough, so I'm going to drop the price. So now I'm going to drop the price. What if they drop the price all the way down to $2.50? Okay, well, on this graph, look at where 250 intersects my demand line and my supply line. So at 250, look at this. Here's my demand line. That's at a quantity of 5. So that means at $2.50, I can get 5 people to buy ice cream cones. But at $2.50, I'm willing to sell 9 of them. So I'm willing to sell 9, only 5 people are willing to buy, so how many ice cream cones am I going to not sell and are sitting there melting? $4. So what do I have to do? I have to drop the price again. My point being is that I can actually determine where the greatest and smallest surplus is based on my graph. So the greatest surplus is going to be where supply and demand are furthest apart above equilibrium. So if you look at my $4 here, you notice that the supply and demand are way far apart, okay? And it's going to be the furthest away from equilibrium. That's going to be where your greatest surplus is. Now to figure out how much of a surplus there is, all you have to do is subtract the demand from the supply. And that determines how much of a surplus. So we already did this. We already talked about at $4, we had 13 that I'm willing to sell and only 1 person willing to buy. So I can figure out that there's going to be a surplus of 12. So that's how I figure out the greatest surplus. Okay, so what can I do about, how about the smallest surplus? Well, the smallest surplus is where supply and demand are closest together above equilibrium. So above equilibrium and the closest together. Well, if you want to get technical, $2 is our equilibrium. So anything above $2 is going to cause a surplus. So if we want to get technical, $2.01 will cause a surplus. But I can't figure out how much of a surplus there is at $2.01. So whenever I ask about the smallest surplus, I'm asking about the points that are actually plotted, the points that I'm actually giving you or you have on your supply and demand curve. So at $2.50, okay, this is going to be our smallest surplus. Okay, because they're the points that I have figured out that are closest to equilibrium. And to figure out how much of a surplus there is, again, I'm going to subtract the demand from the supply. So the demand quantity minus the supply quantity. So at $2.50, I know that there are 5 people willing to buy my ice cream, and I'm willing to offer 9. So 9 minus 5 will give you 4. Okay. Last thing that I want to point out about surpluses. So we kind of already alluded to this, but how do you solve a surplus? You have too much supply, not enough demand. What are you going to do? Okay, well, some people obviously answer, well, just, get people to buy more. Well, they're not going to buy more at that price. They don't want it. So what do you have to do? You have to drop the price. Anytime there's a surplus, you have to drop the price. This is why, for example, you oftentimes see after major holidays, after Halloween or Christmas or Easter, all that, candy and decor and everything else oftentimes gets put on sale. Why? Well, that's all the stuff that they had left over at the end. So it's telling you that, hey, they had a surplus. They had way too much. Now, the other option is what we call a rebate. Now, a rebate is slightly different. If you've never heard of a rebate, oftentimes rebates are offered. I see them more frequently at like hardware stores and kinds of things. For example, I remember that Lowe's was offering a rebate on paint, of all things. So you'll see lots of times they're advertised. I think Menards advertises a lot, where it's like $20 after mail-in rebate. Okay, what does that mean? Well, okay, so I did this with paint, where I went to the store and I bought this gallon of paint that was, believe it or not, $40, $40 gallon of paint. And they said there's a $10 mail-in rebate. Okay, so when I brought the gallon of paint up to the counter, how much did I actually pay? $40. But then they ask you, oh, would you like to go and do the online rebate or would you like the mail-in rebate? Now, so what that means is that you can go to an online website and you can actually fill out information, or you can hand fill in the information and snail mail it through the mail. I go and opt for the electronic version, and so what happens is that I go on the website and I fill out all of the information about, who I am and where I bought the paint from and evidence, of the receipt that I actually bought the paint. And then what happens is that the paint company will then send me $10 in the mail, a check in the mail. Now, it'll take several weeks for me to get my $10 check, but I will get it. So essentially, it's like lowering the price. So I paid $40, but they're going to send me $10 back. So it's really like the paint was on sale, right? So why doesn't the company just put the paint on sale? Any ideas? Well, hey, if you thought about it, is that, do you suppose a lot of people do that? I mean, lots of people will say, oh yeah, I'll do the rebate. You have a certain window of when you're supposed to fill out this information. A lot of people will forget to do that. And so that's the idea is that, hey, they collect their $40. If you do the rebate, hey, that's on you, great for you. But if you don't, no big deal. They got their $40. So I didn't write anything down here. I would suggest you write it down. How do you solve the problem of a surplus? Lower the price, offer a rebate. What's a rebate? Rebate is a partial refund on the purchase price that a producer may offer. Partial refund on the purchase price that a producer may offer. Okay, so that's all about a surplus. Next video, we'll talk about the exact opposite. Thanks for watching.